Howdy everyone. So the Assassin's Creed collab is out and we're going to look at it from a Siege perspective. As always, if there's something that's RTA specific, I'll probably mention it. But otherwise, everything here is going to be from a straight Siege perspective. So let's go ahead and get into it. And one last thing, I also want to give a shout out to Quatzo and the team at Summoner's War Farm because they had this out, I think, the same day or next day. And being able to data mine and get like the exact ratios and everything, because Comatose doesn't put them out, it really helps a lot. So thanks again for that. So first is Altair. I've only played the very first Assassin's Creed game, so I'm not too familiar with the names, so I'm sorry if I butcher any of them. But let's go ahead and look at his skills. So the S1, this is the same S1 as Ezio, I believe. Ignores damage reduction effect. So this means you go through shield, you go through invincibility. The damage ratio on that is 380%. It's about average. You can kind of compare it to Carcano S1 in terms of the effect, but the damage is not, it's about average damage. And the S2 is threat state. This is pretty interesting because the only threat states we have, I believe, are Ophelia and the Dark Paint Master. What is the Dark Art Master? I can't think of his name right now. Yeah, I think they're the only two with threat state. So this is, I guess, a new part of threat state because they added it with Ophelia when they on her S3, and then they didn't really add it too much on the newer monsters. So this is very interesting, especially on an attack type. It's not like a support or a tank on. This is on an attack type. So this is 2 turns. Ophelia has it for 3 turns, I believe. So this is a little bit of a weaker version. It is on a second skill. It's not a main skill. And then the skill 3 attacks the enemy with a hidden blade if you don't get attacked during the turn of the enemy. Increases up to 100% when you use the skill. Is this automatic? That's the only thing I'm not too sure about. Because the thing is, you can't even... I don't think you can get Altair yet. Like, people have to wait a little bit because you still have to do the event. So I'm not too sure... I think this is an automatic effect on a cooldown. So if you don't get attacked, then the effect goes off automatically and on a 3-turn cooldown after skill ups. That's what I'm assuming. In terms of Siege, the best it's kind of hard to use like an LD on offense a little bit if you're doing like a bruiser battle, because you can't really manipulate the AI as well unless there's like a dark unit on the defense. I think the best way to use a monster like this is maybe to use the threat state on something else and then just let Altair wail away on something. He does have Resistance Awakening, which is kind of okay if you're trying to shoot for like 100 res build on the offenses, like on all 3 of your offense. But otherwise, this is going to be something that you really need to build a very smart offense around. Because otherwise, being light element, it just makes it a lot harder to use on offense. But, I mean, the kit is very interesting, at least, because this is another threat state user. So I think somebody can come up with something pretty good here. Or maybe when we eventually are able to summon him, we'll think of something. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Ezio. And again, the same S1 as Altair. And let's see, the S2, this is a fire one. This fire one awakens into accuracy. Now, going forward, some of these monsters... they don't have an awakening bonus stat. I went through and kind of looked and saw what they awakened into. So if I don't mention what they awaken into, we're going to assume that that means that their awakening bonus is their leader skill. So the Fire Ezio awakens into accuracy, so keep that in mind. So S2, decreased defense with 100. I'm going to read this off as if it was skilled up. Attacks 2 times to decrease its defense with a 100% chance, and its attack bar with a 50% chance. So this is straight up just a strong skill just because it's a defense break. And attack bar manipulation, pretty decent cooldown, and really the activation rate is not that bad. And then the skill 3, inflicts damage that ignores the defense in proportion to enemy's lost HP by at least 30% up to 100% when you attack on your turn. So this is kind of good. I think when I first saw this is assuming for like defense usage. I thought maybe this was something that can kind of just wail away at Wendy, because one thing that Wendy suffers from, if you control Wendy's attack bar to where Wendy can't take more turns for the shield, you can kind of build Ezio on like a destroy build and then just Wendy can't really do anything because Wendy can't take turns. You still need Wendy to take turns for things to happen because that shield is really important. So I was just thinking when I first saw this that maybe this is something that could counter Wendy if you're building something just like as a defense usage. But otherwise, I feel like this is probably just like another offense fire damage dealer bruiser you could use. But the effect is useful enough that you can kind of try to counter some offenses. All right, moving on to the water one. He awakens into crit rate. Again, same S1. S2 has threat state. So this is what Altair had. So this is threat state on Ezio. Awakens into HP for Arena, unfortunately. This isn't really for Siege. And then attacks all enemies to remove all beneficial effects. Afterwards, increases the attack bar of the ally with the highest attack bar by 25%, and the attack power with the second highest attack bar for 2 turns. So, reading this off, this just reads as a Siege skill. It's a strip, and it buffs 2 monsters. So, I mean, this really reads as something you would use in Siege, so that's already pretty good. You have a strip, you have a boost, so you could kind of build a comp around. Think of it kind of like if you were doing like a Chandra team, where Chandra got that like 25% boost, which doesn't seem that big, but that meant that you could do swift Chandra teams. So you could kind of build around Ezio's strip to boost something on defense, and then that third unit gets an attack buff, which is pretty strong. Attack buff is like the attack buff and defense buff scale super high. Like they do 70% scaling. Like they're really strong buffs compared to like crit rate or some of the other buffs. So this is a really strong skill. I imagine Water Ezio is going to be something we might see on defense, mainly because it's a strip, but also just because the skills are interesting enough that it can work. So one thing to keep in mind also with this ignores all damage reduction effects. This means that Ezio for like versus Commune offenses can just go through Commune shield and destroy his HP, which means it gives less chance for Commune to be able to tank that unit, for example. So I think Ezio's got a pretty good potential for Siege defense. And moving on to Wind, this is the one that doesn't have a clear awakening bonus, so we're going to assume that it is the leader skill. Again, same S1. And then this is the one that increases defense 100% chance, attack bar by 50% chance. And then attacks all enemies to decrease their attack bar by 25%. Decreases the skill cooldown time of all allies by 1 turn each if an enemy dies. So this is kind of hard to use on Siege, because the ratio on the skill 3 is 440%. It's not crazy high, and you're kind of relying on something to die for the bonus effect. I have a feeling that this is either just going to be another basic wind damage dealer on offense, which, I mean, we have Logan, we have Royd. I mean, there's so many wind damage dealers that you could use instead. And if something dies, usually that means you're kind of already winning. So it's a kind of an awkward kit. This feels more like an RTA usage, if anything, just because attack bar manipulation is probably one of the strongest things in this game, specifically attack bar absorption. So I feel like that it does become more effective in RTA to an extent. So I do think this is more of an RTA usage, but you could definitely use an offense at least just because it's a wind damage dealer. All right, moving on to Light Ezio. He awakens into resistance. Again, same S1. And threat state, this is almost like Altair a little bit. And then the S3 is the one that separates it. Attacks the enemy and fills up your attack bar if the enemy dies. Additionally, passive skills of all enemies excluding the bosses are not activated. So the best comparison for this is Hanwoo. So this is like a single target Hanwoo, but you fill up your attack bar afterwards. So you could technically snipe something. I think you might get in a whole turn afterwards, and then you can threat state either yourself or something else to tank. So this is a pretty good offense unit. For defense, I'm not too sure. Threat state is pretty strong, but I'm not too sure what this would be used for. Maybe if you're trying to build something on defense to go through like Triana or maybe I'm trying to think. it's mainly probably like Triana type effects or anything where you're trying to mitigate a death. That's the only thing I could think for defense. But for offense, this is definitely gonna be something you could consider as like a snipe team because it ignores passives. That means it ignores Theomars. You ignore Triana. Beast Riders. There's a lot you can get through. So this is gonna be a pretty good premium offense for some users. All right, and lastly, Dark Ezio does not have a clear awakening, so we're gonna assume it is the accuracy lead. Again, same as S1. S2 decreases defense with a 100% chance, and the attack bar a 50% chance. And attacks additionally with an attack that cannot be counterattacked when you attack the enemy on your turn. So this is, you need to think about it like this. This is an additional attack on top of a single or a double attack. So Ezio is someone that could potentially be good on just like additional damage, just wailing away. I don't think the effect is too crazy. It's mostly just a lot of like raw damage that you're getting out of this unit. What it's good for specifically, not too sure, because it says it attacks addition when attack that cannot be counterattacked when you attack the enemy on your turn. So let's say, for example, Kinky. Wouldn't that still proc from the S2, or does that mean that you can't counterattack Ezio at all? That's the only thing I'm not too sure about. If you can't get counterattacked at all, then maybe this is another good Kinky counter, because, I mean, Comtos already decided that Kinky is super overpowered. Super overpowered for some reason, because they changed the passive where he could actually be crit by a monster that could guarantee crit. So, hopefully it's not another Kinky counter, but otherwise, if you're going to build this for defense, it's just straight up just going to be a unit that's just really annoying to deal with just because of the damage output. Because in general, LDs on defense are harder to tank sometimes if there's like multiple elements because you can't manipulate as well. So that's always a thing to think about. Even though the kits are kind of weird, being an LD with a defense break to manipulate attack bars for the offense user is enough to get people all riled up and confused. So there is some potential here for defense. For offense, it really depends how this effect works on the passive. All right, now we're moving into Bayek, I believe. And Bayek Fire awakens into crit rate. So looking at his skills already, let's go ahead and look at the skills first. Attacks the enemy to disturb its HP recovery for 2 turns with a 100% chance. So this is actually a really strong skill. HP Disturb on S1 screws with a lot of comps where you have like you have like subtle sustain. So say for example, you have a Lulu for sustain. So if you have something like this wailing away at your tank, you need a cleanse to heal, which is kind of bad. You usually want to cleanse to remove debuffs, but having an S1 heal block means that you're wasting cleanses to heal a lot of times. You can get around that kind of with like Raccoony or Tetra, but the best way I could compare it to is Dominic S1. Sometimes when I would use talk offenses, Dominic's S1 would kind of mess up a lot of sustain because you're relying on cleansing to get a heal off. So you can kind of think about that as extra damage dealt because you're denying sustain. And sometimes if that tank is lowest HP and it auto heals from like a Tetra or Raccoony, but it doesn't cleanse the heal block, you just made that passive nullified for like a 1 or 2 turns. So this is a lot stronger than it seems for bruiser offenses. So I think this class of this family is going to be kind of strong. So let's go ahead and look at the S2. Attacks the enemy 2 times to remove 1 beneficial effect and silence the enemy for 2 turns with 100% chance respectively. And it scales by your max HP. Decent skill, HP scaling. Let's move on to the third one. Removes all harmful effects granted on yourself. Okay, this skill is kind of... I had already looked at Fire Bayek before, so I'm about to like go crazy about him as a bruiser offense. Let me just explain skill. Removes all harmful effects granted on yourself and recovers your HP by 40%. Afterwards, attacks the enemy 5 times, dealing damage proportion to your max HP. So this is on a 3-turn cooldown. You need to compare this to Vigor or Ashir. Like, this is a 5-star unit with a 5-hit multi-hit on a 3-turn cooldown. So this monster is super stat efficient. It's HP type with crit rate awakening, HP lead, HP scaling. Like, I think Bayek is going to be something that you can probably use almost everywhere PvP wise. This is probably something you're going to see in RTA, Siege defense, Siege offense. The best way I can compare it to on Siege offense, there's an archetype of fire cleansers that cleanse themselves or the team and then have a strip. So the first tier is Xiangfei, where he can cleanse your whole team. Usually you run these with like double cleanser offenses. And then there's the next tier of fire cleanser that also has a strip, and that's Kumar and Juno. So with Bayek's kit also having an HP lead for guild content and just what there is to offer, I think there's a lot you're going to be able to do with Fire Bayek, and it's probably something I'm going to be looking forward to hopefully summon, because this is kind of what my playstyle is. So, yeah. Alright, and now the Water Bayek. Again, same S1. And no clear awakening bonus, so we're going to assume it is the defense lead. And then the S2 shoots 4 arrows to attack the enemy, decreasing the enemy's attack bar by 20% with a 100% chance, HP scaling. It's an okay skill. It's like another turn denial skill, so you could probably go up to like 80% attack bar reduction. It's 4 arrow shots, so you could abuse multi-hits. And then third skill, attacks the enemy to reset the attack bar. Attacks 2 more times to inflict damage proportionate to the enemy's max HP. So, I'm trying to think okay, so this is actually, in combination with the S2, this is a really big turn denial kit. So, you have potential 80% attack bar reduction, and then you have another full attack bar reduction with, like, multi-hits. Both of these have multi-hits. So you could build this unit just really tanky, and just manipulate the attack bar, or but it would, with, like, additional damage and just be really annoying. It is single target, so you could probably just tank it out pretty well. But this is something that is probably going to be... It's probably going to be closer to either a PvE unit, or it's going to be very niche, like, for Altair or Siege. Just because the scaling on this is enemy max HP, and the scaling on this is your max HP. Enemy max HP scaling is not that crazy in like PvP content. It doesn't scale as high as in like dungeons, so this is a little bit awkward for PvP, but the effects themselves and then abusing additional damage is something that you could kind of pass it away for, because even though it's scaling by enemy max HP, you can think of it kind of like if you're hitting into like a Kumar or a Ritesh, you're technically getting higher scaling because this is a 4-star unit, so it kind of works out in that way, but again, not as high as like in PvE content. But otherwise, a very interesting unit. The hardest thing when new units come out is just getting skill up, so it's like, I wish I could play with this, but I'm not going to have the skill ups for a while, but very interesting unit. Alright, up next we have the Wind Bayek. He awakens into accuracy. Again, same S1. S2 attacks the enemy 2 times to remove 1 beneficial effect and silence the enemy for 100% chance, respectively. Max HP scaling. Skill 3 is a passive. Inflicts continuous damage on the enemy for 2 turns when attacking. Increases the damage dealt by 20% and recovers your HP by 3% per harmful effect granted on the enemy. So, when I first saw this unit, also has an attack lead. That's not bad. So, this is going to sound really weird. He kind of reminds me of an offbeat Dominic. So, as I mentioned before, S1 heal block is really strong. And then he also has multi-hits and then the continuous damage. You kind of need to think about the damage, and then he has sustain. So there's no absorb like Dominic, but he does have like other effects in his kit. Silence is actually really strong. 2-turn silence. And like the activation rate on this is really good, and on a 3-turn cooldown. So you need to think about it as the sustain and damage distribution is going into other places. So because this is continuous damage, being damaged instead of just like flat damage for like a Dominic, when you're doing bruiser offenses, a lot of times you can get trapped if there's like debuff stacking on the defense. That's why a lot of Nora defenses are pretty strong. Sometimes people will underestimate the debuff stacking, and they'll bring in like a Riley, for example, and Riley's cleanse is a fake cleanse. It's only 1 debuff cleansed. So if you can get debuff stacking to where they can't cleanse, even Rakuni could give it some trouble, then this is actually something that could be kind of scary on defense if utilized correctly. Really good base stats. This is something that I would probably consider on defense for Siege. All right, and next is the Light Bayek. Does not have a clear awakening bonus, so we're going to assume it's a crit rate lead, same S1. S2 is the shoots 4 arrows to decrease the attack bar. And then the skill 3, attacks the enemy to deal damage that increases according to your max HP and destroys the enemy's HP by the inflicted damage. Additionally, the damage increases by up to 100% in proportion to the enemy's destroyed HP. So this kit is... The S3 specifically kind of reminds me of the Light Poison Master, which didn't really see much use. It was HOH. I don't think I've ever seen that unit ever used. Or Dorothy, for example. Just those skills that rely on destroying HP to do something interesting, I guess. Those skills don't really do too crazy on like a defense usage. And then also this is a light unit, so for offense usage it's really weird. Just destroying from skills, unless it's May. Like May the Fire Martial Cat is like a good example where it does work. But on like a light unit where you can't really manipulate attack bar, it doesn't really work well on offense or defense too well. So this is kind of a weird kit. The damage ratio on the S3 is 460% attack plus 36% of the enemy's max HP. I believe that's by the destroyed enemy's max HP because it does additional damage based on that destroyed HP. Yeah, I think the saving grace of this is that for defense usage, it's a light unit, so you can kind of try to play with attack bar there. Because he does, you could technically say that he has built-in destroy, so you could consider like other offsets or such, but otherwise it's going to be kind of hard to use on defense, but we can try. And then onto Dark Bayek, he awakens into crit rate, same S1, S2, removes a beneficial effect and silence, max HP scaling, and then an ego attacks a random enemy to stun the target for 1 turn. So this kind of screams RTA usage. You could definitely still use this on siege defense just because what this means is if you run this with like a Nora or another stripper, which he does also have his own strip, and he's LD and has like, maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe this is actually a really good defense unit. Because if you think about it, despair on defense is really strong. Like if you run like a double despair defense, which 2 units would despair, it's pretty strong. So if you imagine this on violent with like another despair user, or even like double despair users, you can kind of get away with just locking down the defense with just stunning over and over, because if this attacks a random enemy and then you proc and it stuns another enemy, that's really strong. Because the way stuns and freezes work in this game, when someone gets stunned, it also pauses their cooldowns. So crowd control is really strong in a bruiser offense where you're trying to keep track of cooldowns, and getting set back 1 to 2 turns is really devastating. So I think this kit is kind of interesting for defense. I'm sure someone can make it work. All right, let's go ahead and look at Kassandra. And also rest in peace to Amanda. S1 decreases the attack bar by 30%. Oh, and she awakens into crit rate. Awakens the attack... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, awakens into crit rate. Attacks the enemy to increase the attack bar by 30% with a... Let's add that up. 75% chance. It's okay. There's a lot of monsters in this game nowadays that have an S1 30% attack bar reduction. S2 attacks the enemy to inflict damage that ignores the enemy's defense. Decreases the skill cooldown time of Hero Strike by 1 turn if the enemy gets defeated by the skill. So I believe that means it would go to a 2-turn cooldown instead of a 3-turn cooldown. So the scaling on this S2 is 280%. Second Awakened Akali is 330%. But you do have to keep in mind that Kassandra has crit rate awakening, so it might kind of balance it out. And then it'll make more sense with this 3rd skill. Grants invincibility for 1 turn and life drain for 2 turns on yourself when you're inflicted with fatal damage. So I'm not too sure how this works specifically. I don't know if it's like a straight, it cancels out that damage and grants invincible, or that's how I'm going to assume it works. Like if she's about to die, she'll get invincible and maybe that'll block the damage, and then she'll get life drain and be able to come back. This is something when you're doing cleave offenses, sometimes you might only snipe 1 or 2 units, and then you need to be able to clean up. And having a unit like this on offense that can clean up is pretty good. I mean, she has built-in life drain, which is like vampire set. So compared to like a Garo, who usually needs vampire, she kind of has her own. And then this is a fairly low cooldown. And it's actually not too high, but I mean, you can kind of get away with her lower ratio and kind of utilize her skill tree to last longer. So I do think she's going to be interesting for a lot of those turn 1 cleavers out there. So yeah, have fun with that. And then next is Kassandra, the water version. Does not have awakening bonus, clearly. So we're just going to assume it's the accuracy. Increase the accuracy of ally by 35%, not bad. So I'm going to read out these skills. Try to guess what 5-star I'm comparing this to. So skill 1, attacks. This is the same skill 1's 30% attack power reduction, 75% chance. Skill 2, decreases the defense of all enemies for 2 turns with an 80% chance on a 3-turn cooldown. And then attacks the enemy 3 times to leave a branding effect for 3 turns each. 3 times 3-turn branding. That's a lot. That's a really high activation rate, and that lasts for a long time. Additionally, the attack always lands as a critical hit and deals 100% increased damage if the target's attribute is wind. So the assumption here is that this allows the AI to be manipulated, and that means that maybe she can attack wind. That's what I assumed. I'm not too sure. Someone can probably confirm. If it does work that way, then there's a very good chance that she's going to be really strong on defense. And the comparison I'm comparing it to in a 5-star is Nana. So because this is a 4-star unit, I think there's a lot of potential, specifically because accuracy lead is really strong on defense when you can make it work. It's one of the reasons that Nana was really strong, because it means that they get a lot of free stats, and you can't really abuse running 100% res for extra turn 2 safety. So in 4-star towers, for example, you run the accuracy lead, and then this skill 2, a 3-turn AoE defense break on Nana was super strong. Like, for her kit, just being given this on a 3-turn cooldown with 100% activation rate was just, like, at the time, was just crazy. A little bit weaker here, 80% activation rate, but it's still pretty decent. I think there's going to be some defense potential here. You could definitely use her on offense as well, because this skill means that you can kind of bypass certain units that usually you might not use, like a fire unit to kill. So let's see if I can give a good example. Maybe maybe not a Dominic. It depends if it's tanky or not. Because this means that, say for example, you can snipe and kill something, and then go and being able to finish off the fire unit left over, and you're not going to get soloed, for example. Maybe like a Nor or something like that. So I think her kit is very strong. You're probably going to see her on offense and possibly defense. And now when Kassandra, she awakens into accuracy. Same S1. S2, attacks the enemy to inflict damage that ignores the enemy's defense. Okay, this is the same as the Fire Kassandra. So this is ignore defense damage. And then the skill 3, attacks all enemies to reset their attack bar and increase the chance of landing a glancing hit for 2 turns. This is a kind of a devastating skill. So I have a feeling that this is going to be like an RTA usage for this skill specifically. You could still use it on defense. You would just need to be able to run it with a stripper. Because what this means for some units, you're resetting their attack bar, okay? And then you're also throwing glancing. So if there are units that rely on landing debuffs, you're almost essentially setting them back 3 turns. So it's not exactly a chung pung in terms of devastation, but it's kind of close. I think even if you don't land the attack bar reset on everything, you do have potential for desync. Even just landing the glancing is enough. So her kit is kind of interesting. I think if you're going to see her on siege defense, it's going to be with another stripper. I'm not too sure about offense, though. You could kind of consider her as being able to deal damage on offense and then also having a little bit of mitigation by controlling the defense at the same time. You do have to be careful using AoE on offense. A lot of times the units have revenge sets or it's like a kinky and they have an S1 defense break and you screw yourself over that. So you do have to be careful. But otherwise, very interesting kit. I think some RTA users might enjoy her. But in terms of siege, yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting. And then like Kassandra, does not have a clear awakening bonus. We're going to assume it's the HP lead. Same S1, S2, AoE defense break, S3, AoE 2-turn stun. So I don't know if this is going to be a siege unit. It's not really too consistent just for the S3. it is an AoE defense break on a light unit. I think this is what I'm more interested in, but even though this is a 50% chance, you need to remember that defenses in high-level Siege don't really need to go... They don't need to go like 80%, 90% win rate to be good. Even if you're getting a 10, 15% win rate, you're still doing pretty well. So if this lands and it's devastating enough for the offense, you can kind of just win straight off from this skill 3 landing. So yes, it's a little bit low activation, but with this kit, I think you can kind of make it work. And in combination, she has turn denial. So I do think even though that her activation chance is low, she still has potential on siege defense. And again, she's a light unit, so that's enough to make her being for consideration on defense. So I think she's definitely interesting. And yeah, we'll see how she goes. And then Dark Kassandra, crit rate awakening, and a speed lead, 21%. Same S1, it reduces attack bar. Skill 2, this is the ignore defense damage. S2, that gets reduced when you get a kill. And then the S3 grants endure and attack bar increasing effect on all allies for 2 turns. Okay, so this skill for siege defense specifically, I'm going to try not to compare her to Sylvia as much. But say, for example, you throw Kassandra on a Swift set. She puts up endure, cleave offense is kind of screwed. And then you kind of just clap back. That's one build you could do. Otherwise, she's just something that is just really devastating if you don't know how she's built. I think her kit is very decent for defense. When you think about this, you think, okay, which you could use on offense as well. You could use this on offense to kind of give your cleave a little bit more safety, because speed lead already makes it really easy to do that. So this could give a little bit extra safety for your turn 1 cleaves. But otherwise, for turn 2, I think there is some potential for defense here. And like I mentioned before, LDs always have that consideration for defense because of the AI. So yeah, if you summon her, yeah, grats, because she's kind of cool. All right, lastly, we're on an Eivor. She awakens into nothing clearly, so we're going to assume it's the accuracy lead. This is a pretty high lead, too, 55%, although it's only for fire, which might be fine. You got to keep in mind that even though it's only specifically for 1 unit, it might be fine if you only need it for Eivor, or if you're running like a multi-fire, like 2 or 3 triple fire offense or whatever, so it can still be fine. S1 decreases the defense for 2 turns with a 40% chance, and that attacks twice. So already an S1 defense break is already really strong. There are a lot of units that you can think of with S1 defense breaks. They're pretty strong. Onimushas, Panda Warriors, just at the top of my head. It's just a really strong skill 1, because for one, it's devastating. 70% defense reduction is really strong. Like I mentioned before, defense buff, attack break, defense break, those are the debuffs in the game that scale extremely high. They're really strong. So having this on S1 means that you can run revenge sets and you can win just from getting a 15% revenge. It's another win condition for a defense. So do keep that in mind for units like this. And then S2 attacks the enemy 2 times to stun for 1 turn, decreases the attack bar by 50% chance with a 65% chance each. Additionally, the inflicted damage increases by 50% if the enemy is under inability effects. So I guess you kind of need a stun to get the extra damage, unless you have another stun somewhere else on your team. But otherwise, I guess it's okay. You kind of have to think about it as she does S1. This is like on a violent set. She does S1, procs into S2, and that is supposed to be what's devastating for her. The S3 recovers the HP by 30% of the lost HP if you don't get attacked during the enemy turn. Additionally, the damage inflicted to the enemy increases by 50% if you have half or more HP remaining. So the passive is going to make her a little bit harder to kill. And then this S1, S2 proc combo is going to be pretty devastating. So the S1, also these are multi-hits. So the S1 is in combination with altogether is a 380% ratio. The S2 altogether is a 580% ratio. And this, I believe the second hit is going to do 50% more damage, which I believe is, what is that, 145? So, okay, hold on. What, 735 potential from the S2? So you can get you can get over like 1,000% damage ratio. And then in combination, the passive also increases damage. So she's kind of devastating if she's able to get a good like combo off. Her base attack is not that crazy. I think that's the only thing that's going to hurt her because she is a 4-star. So we'll kind of have to see if this is enough to make her strong, because a lot of units, when they have low attack, their ratios are usually high to make up for it. For example, Lu Mei, her attack is really not that crazy, but her ratios are actually really good. And then if you take in a combination that she can chain those skills, those ratios add up to her just doing a lot of damage. And then also she cycles her own turns, abuses additional damage. Okay, well, sorry, traumatized from Lu Mei meta. Next person. All right, Water Eivor awakens into res. Pretty good. Same S1 defense break. Pretty nice. S2 attacks 3 times to inflict continuous damage for 2 turns with a 70% chance each. And then the skill 3. Okay. This is a very long skill 3. At first, it made absolutely no sense how this works, because, you know. Okay, so I'm gonna read this out and I'll explain it. Grants up to 3 effects of the might of the clan according to your stats when the battle begins. So the other unit that let me read the skill first. Attacks power increases the damage dealt to the enemy by 100%. Defense decreases the damage received from enemies by 30%. Attack speed removes 1 beneficial effect. Grants an enemy with a 65% chance of skill ups if you attack on your turn. So what this means, there's a threshold for all these skills, and if you reach those thresholds, you're able to get these bonuses. So this is estimated from Reddit. This was an estimation. You need about 800 attack to get the bonus attack. The defense was a little bit off from, I believe, from testing. Maybe someone can check on that. It was 950 from Reddit, but I think someone confirmed that it was around a little bit higher, maybe 965 or a little bit higher, for that damage reduction. And then about 145 speed for the stripping on the passive. So this unit has a lot of potential of how you want to use it. So at first, the way I thought about it, if you really don't care about the stripping or the damage, you can build this as a triple revenge tank with 30% damage reduction and then a skill 1 defense break. If you go through and look at the archetypes of water tanks that have a skill 1 defense break and damage reduction, that's actually good damage reduction. The only ones I can really think of are Kernodon, the water lizard man, and then Alan, the water vagabond. Their damage reduction is very specific and not too great. It's only versus like very niche cases. This is just a straight up 30% damage reduction and a skill 1 defense break. So for offense usage, this is a really good siege tank in that regard. Otherwise, there are a lot of combinations. There's an S1 defense break multi-hit, S2 multi-hit. You can abuse additional damage. You can spec into increased damage dealt with stripping. You can very easily also hit all 3 of these specs and just run all 3, depending on your win quality. There's really a lot you can do with this unit, and I think this is probably going to be one of the coolest units of this family. I believe we saw her used in RTA, and she was already pretty interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, does this proc on multi-hits? That's the only thing I need to see. Because if this procs on multi-hits, this is even better. Like, if she can strip 3 times, that's pretty crazy, or double hit strip. If it's only 1 strip, single time, regardless of multi-hit, then that's still fine. But this kit is just, it's very strong. There's a lot you can do with this unit. Theory craft. Probably one of the units of this collab that you're probably going to have the most fun theory crafting with. And then the Wind Eivor awakens into, we're going to assume accuracy, because there's no clear awakening bonus. S1 defense break, S2 multi-hit with the continuous damage, and then skill 3 attacks the enemy 3 times to inflict continuous damage for 1 turn each, and attacks the enemy once more to explode continuous damage granted on the target to additionally deal the corresponding damage. So the very first thought that people had was the Fire Pixie. I don't really use the Fire Pixie, so I can't even think of the name right now. I'm sure someone's screaming it out right now, but I just cannot think of the name right now. So that's the biggest comparison of the skill. But when I first saw this unit, I thought, okay, skill 1 defense break, bunch of multi-hits. You can build this unit just really tanky and just abuse multi-hits and still deal a lot of damage. In terms of defense usage, I'm not too sure, but this does kind of mean that you can use this on offense and build her tanky to, like, be able to eat some damage. So, for example, there's an archetype, specifically Royd, where you have kind of like a damage healer that can kind of deal a bunch of damage but also take a hit. So, for example, if you need to take damage from a Commune, you still want to be kind of tanky, because if you run like a Logan, for example, your Commune is still going to shred through you. So being able to run a unit that can be really tanky and still do damage on offense can be pretty good in some cases. Even the accuracy leader is pretty nice. So say, for example, let's say you did Wind Eivor, Triana, Cha-Cha, for example. That's kind of the format, but so this isn't like a complete PvE GB12 unit. I think you can kind of still use this on Siege offense. Maybe even Siege defense. I'm not sure, but this is definitely something that you could consider on Siege offense for that archetype of tanky wind damage healer. So, yeah. And then next here is Light Eivor, Speed Awakening. This is the only unit of the collab with a Speed Awakening, 118 speed. Skill 1 defense break, again, really strong. Skill 1 S2 attacks enemy 2 times the stun for 1 turn, and decreases attack by 50%, 65% chance, and then deals more damage if under inability effect. And then the passive grants gains immunity against inability effects and increases your attack bar by 10% whenever the enemy or an ally gains a turn. So the comparison obviously is Jaeger. Their kits are still very different, so other than sharing that same immunity against inability effects, they're still very different units. I think Eivor is just going to be really strong on the basis of just the way her kit is. A skill 1 defense break, crowd control, and then just like self-turn cycling. Like, there's a lot in this kit that I think is going to be very strong in either RTA or Siege defense. I think there's a lot of potential here, and even if you might not use the inability effect immunity, there are still units like Elucia that she can get around. So I do think she has some Siege defense potential. She's pretty interesting. And then lastly here, Dark Eivor, Res Awakening, skill 1 defense break, skill 2 attacks 3 times, continuous damage, 70% chance, multi-hit. And then skill 3 increases all allies attack power for 3 turns and attack bar by 30%. Afterwards, all allies except yourself attack random enemies. So I think no matter where you use this, it's going to be pretty strong, depending how you set it up as. I'm sure you could definitely do a cleave with this. For Siege defense, I'm kind of comparing it to you remember the Sierra Gianna Ryok defenses? This is the biggest comparison I can give, except this is obviously a lot stronger kit. One, because she's got a skill 1 defense break, Nat 5, light and dark, abuse additional damage. And then just this skill 3 alone is just like really strong, because you're setting up with the team up. It's not just a straight team up. You're giving an attack buff, attack bar. So I think this is something you're going to see in RTA, but also on Siege offense and defense. So this is a pretty strong kit. And then again, being LD, pretty strong. So I think there's a lot of potential here. And with that, that's pretty much it. And that was probably one of the longer walkthroughs for Siege perspective of new units. I think a good way to do this in the future, I kind of gave it a try this time, is that we kind of wait for this to look at the base stats and awakening bonuses of monsters, because I think looking at monster skills as is in the patch, it doesn't really give you the full idea of how the monster is going to act. A lot of times awakening bonuses and leader skills completely change how a monster is, excluding their skills. So I think this is a good format going forward. overall for these monsters, I think this is probably one of the best collabs in terms of like skill expression. In terms of how like there are a lot of different type of effect and skills. Adding more of older effects like the threat state. There's a lot of interesting things in this collab. I think what I'm probably most interested in myself is the water Eivor and the fire Bayek, just because of my playstyles. But I think there's a little bit of everything for everyone. There's a lot of turn 1 potential. There's turn 2. There's those theory crafting offenses that you can kind of play with, like the water Eivor or Altair on offense. So there's a lot here that you can unpack. So other than that, if you have any thoughts, just leave a comment and we'll check it out. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.